Howdy y'all, JT Johnson here with the Soulblight Gravelords Warscroll review, Direwolves. Alright guys, we're getting into some Direwolves today. This will be the last of the battle line in this series. So let's check it out. Their Warscroll is they have 2 wounds, a 10-inch move, 5 up save, 10 bravery. Its description: a unit of direwolves has any number of models, each armed with rotting fangs and claws. The champion, 1 in every 10 models in this unit, must be a doom wolf. Add 1 to the attack characteristics of the model's rotted fangs and claws. So let's look at the melee profile real quick. They got a 1-inch range, 2 attacks each, 4 to hit, 4 to wound, no rend, and 1 damage. It's not the worst melee weapon profile we've ever seen, but it's nothing really great. They have an ability, Slavering Charge. Add 1 to hit and wound rolls for attacks made with melee weapons by this unit if it made a charge move in the same turn. Keywords: Death, Soulblight Gravelords, Deadwalkers, Summonable, and Direwolves. So let's get into some thoughts. Alright, they have a cost of 135. We got some notes. They're Deadwalker keyword. So that's good. A lot of things in the book arc off Deadwalker keywords. They're summonable. Tons and tons of stuff in the book work with summonal. They are battle line. And Doom Wolf, because they do have a commander, which is sometimes overlooked here. I know a lot of times we'll add in the extra attack for that. But a lot of times you don't think that it has a champion, so you can give orders to itself. So something to keep in mind, unlike zombies. All right, a look at the damage. We got max wound output of 21. You'll never get anywhere close to that unless it's supremely lucky. Average wound output is closer to 2.5 or 3. And average damage on charge is 4.44, almost double damage on the charge. But you got to keep in mind with the coherency rules, getting even just 10 of them in base to base, in swinging range, if you like to say that, it's hard to do. You have to sort of like really be careful with your pile ins to keep coherency. You have to be careful with your ranges. Now it's kind of easier if you're hitting a big long frontage, like you're slamming in and there's the units right there. But really, if you're trying to wrap around and get a smaller unit, it can actually be hard to even get all your 10 wolves in. Bottom line is they're not doing a lot of damage. So let's kind of zoom in here, check out the chart a little bit. And on the charge with no bonus, at a 4-up save, they're doing 2.5. They're doing less than 1 damage at something with a 2-up. On the charge, they do a little bit better. Like I said, almost double. And then I just sort of ran, hey, well, what if we get an extra attack and they haven't done the charge? A little bit less than 4. So it's actually better to charge than actually give them an extra attack. And you can see sort of how that plays out right there. All right, so I'm going to throw out a couple ways to buffs, and this is by no mean a comprehensive chart, and I'm pretty sure there's like 5 or 6 or 7 things in the book that I missed because there's so much synergy with these guys, and there's so much synergy in the book. But just at a glance, some of the ways you can buff them: Legion of the Night, turn 1, they get a +1 armor. Vikros, so basically the Legion ability, they're going to get a +1 to wound if they're wholly within 9 inches of vampire hero. This, you're not going to double stack that on the charge. So just something to think about, that if they're being static, you're not getting +2 to wound. You're always going to take the +1. That's the max, right? Belladama spell under a killing moon, exploding 6s to hit. This is a very good one to have on them. Coven Throne, tactical insight, +1 to save, +1 to hit. But once again, that +1 doesn't double stack with charges. Gorslava, Rise, bring the units back. Manfred, Sword of Unholy Power, is +1 to attack. So that was sort of, there's several different ways in the book to give a +1 to attack to any of your summonable units, and Manfred is one of them. You have a Van Hells with the Necromancer, and that can be fun too, just getting your units sort of pushed around and move that extra activation. Radikar the Beast, Call of the Hunt, +1 attack. Vampire Lord, +1 attack. And the Vengorian, if you're close to them, if you're basically a support piece for your Vengorian, people will be -1 to rend them. So that's something to think about. You notice there is several ways in the book to get the +1 attack. That's kind of what I included in the damage, but at the end of the day, charging is better than the extra attack. And in some of those situations, the extra attack costs CP, which I highly suggest you don't use. These guys don't have enough damage output to make that worth it. Put your CP somewhere else. It's almost better to put it on. There's 10 different things that would take a CP and use it better than these guys getting an extra attack. The good, they're cheap, they're fast, and they're summonable. That is, I mean, for 135 points, you're getting 20 wounds of a 5-up save with a 6-up, more than likely a 6-up invul that can be brought back and healed in multiple ways. So 10-inch move is really good. There's many buffs in the book for their keyword for just bringing back Deadwalkers, summonable. Direwolves a little less, but really just those two, Deadwalker and summonable, there's so many things that arc off that. So they have a 5-up and a 6++ with 20 wounds, and the ability to bring 1 or 2 back a turn makes them a bit more tanky than you would think. Like if you first look at that 5-up save, it isn't that great, to be quite honest, but if you can get that 6-up bubble on them as well, and if you're healing them a little bit, they actually stick around longer than you think. They can have a huge footprint on the board for screening or just blocking, zoning out, and stuff like that. So something to think about. They can spread them out. You can use them to deny areas of the board for the enemy. Lots of synergy in the book, especially if Vikros has a unit leader. So there you go. That is some good things. Let's look at the not so good. All right, they are a large footprint and have coherency problems. So I just said, well, hey, they have a large footprint. I thought that's good. Well, in some instances, it is. Sometimes you want to be able to spread out, and in other instances, you have you might have trouble stacking things in between terrain. You might not want them to spread out, especially like I was saying, if you're trying to get max attacks with them, having them on such big bases and the coherency issues do make them, have to spread out, and you won't get all your attacks in. And since they don't do so much damage anyway, if you're fighting on a small frontage, you can't really expect to do much damage at all. Not a lot of damage output, especially against high armor targets. If you sort of look at the charts, once you start getting into them 2+ saves, you can't bank on them really doing anything. It's sort of just really lucky rolls is pretty much it. So don't expect them to go and take down any high armor units. All right, so some tactics. If you're running a horde heavy army, maybe you have 2 big blocks of zombies sitting in the middle of the board. You can put 1 or 2 of these units on the flanks because they can move up the sides pretty quick, threaten some side objectives, harass the enemy, things like that. They also keep up with your fast-moving heroes. So when you have a zombie dragon, Bengorian lords, things like that, they actually have the innate speed to stay up with them, to either support them, to screen for them, things like that. Leaving 10 in the grave is not a bad option. It'll allow you to leave 1 grave site way in a corner. The dire wolves can pop out and have enough speed to threaten things next turn, unlike skeletons who will just be there sort of stuck, slogging along for the rest of the game. So, when we ever set grave sites, you sort of have to look at mission and matchup. And most of the time you want to set your grave markers sort of in some more central areas or areas that that things can pop out and have some threat. Well, with dire wolves, you can actually extend that bubble a little bit further out, maybe causing the opponent to not worry because he's thinking, hey, there's that if they pop anything out there, it's going to be out of the fight, or actually having to allocate a unit to sit on that point way out there so nothing pops out. And both of those is a win for you. So when they do come out, even though they might seem out of position at first, with a 10-inch move, they can get in the fight really quickly. The Belladama Rush. So this tactic was brought to me by Cody Saltz, who used it in the New Orleans Age of Sigmar GT, and he had really good success with it. You take Belladama and 10 or 20 dire wolves, and you set them up on the deployment zone edge, so the edge of your deployment zone, wholly within 12 of Bella. Use the Pack Alpha ability in the hero phase, and that's going to give them a 6-inch pile in. In the movement, use a CP to auto run 6, and that gives them a 16-inch move total. They can get, if they can, you have to measure all this out, of course. If they can get to under 6 inches of the opponent, they get an auto pile in, and you can lock them down. So this is a way to sort of run into your opponent, lock them down real quick, and then they're going to be sitting there for a turn, maybe two, trying to get through those dire wolves before they can even engage the rest of the board. It allows the rest of your army just to sit back, sit on points, do battle tactics and things like that. If you know you're on an 18-inch sort of deployment, you can sort of just D6 run those guys and then auto 6 Bella so she can keep up with them and keep her bubbles, because you're going to get a lot of benefits from Bella having them in bubbles. You get your 6 inch. Well, you should be well, you're not charging, so you're piling in, so you get your +1 to wound. You'll get your 6++ ward save and things like that. Now, just keep the one thing you keep in mind before you get really excited about this is that at 20 models, it does become 2 units. It does come a little bit of a point investment. And depending on your enemy, if they have a lot of damage output, they can sort of tear through those 40 wounds kind of quick. It just sort of depends. It's really nice to lock people down. It's also really nice if your opponent has a couple of shooting units that you can do that to. Because you're getting around Overwatch with that. You're tying them shooting units down, and most shooting units don't have strong melee, so it can work. I ran a unit of 10 with Bella and used this during the Austin GT. So if it was a good setup where they had some exposed ranged units, I could actually use this to get in, sort of lock them down early. All right. Radikar the Beast, he gets a unit of these for free. They have good synergy together. Use them to soak up Overwatch for him or charge them. Okay, so the first way you can use it is he can pop them out. He charges in, or they charge in, soaks up Overwatch if that's an issue. And then he charges in. Then you're going to have extra attacks on the wolves because he charged as well. I've also thought about when you can charge in with Radikar, get him locked, and then the wolves can charge in and sort of wrap around because they have that big footprint, and that will actually protect him from being countercharged by something else in many respects. Now, this is really situational, and I wouldn't advise it unless you know, hey, I'm going to charge in here. If I don't get the double turn, I'm worried about this other opponent's unit coming in and hitting Radikar in the flank and wiping him out. You can use them to screen him out like that, and while they're still getting in the fight. So it's just something to think about. It's not going to work in every scenario, but they are there. They should be running. His wolves should run next to him unless there's a good reason for them not to. All right, screens. The age of screens is upon us, and if you don't have some screens in current AOS meta, you better have some reasons, or you better have giants, because there's too many things that move really fast and hit really hard, can come out of outflank, can come out of deep strike, and you want to be able to screen out. Iron Jaws, you need screens. Fulminators in living cities, fulminators with a run in charge, you need screens. So if you can screen your stuff off, that gives the other units that you don't want taking damage, vampire lords, grave guards, things like that. It keeps them alive longer and allows them to counter attack. So 10 of these wolves can form a very long line because of the oval bases, and you can stack them up, spread them apart nicely, and you can get a very nice long line with these guys. And in fact, just 10 can screen out a pretty good chunk of your army. They can, depending on your makeup, they can take a whole quarter or even a third of your forces and screen them from the enemy. So basically, the thing is, you let people charge in, they pop your screen. Hopefully, it's your turn next, and then you're able to charge back with all your forces and take out that unit. And most of the time, our trade-off for 135-point dire wolves that could possibly come back at any time is that trade-off. Depending on what we're killing in theirs, it's probably a trade in our favor. Are they better at screening than other units in the book? So if we looked at other screening units, really zombies are the first one that come to mind. And zombies are cheaper for the same wounds and can screen about the same amount of boards. Zombies can get a little bit further out because they can go base to base and just spread. However, the utility of the wolves are a little bit better. So sometimes your opponent isn't going to charge you. They might castle up, or maybe you're not worried about screens. So in that case, your 20 zombies are, maybe they're just now a little bit less effective, or maybe they're just sitting on babysitting a point. Your wolves at least are still viable in your list because you're like, hey, I'm not going to screen them. I'm actually going to use them to go out and attack and threaten the enemy in their territory. All right. Think about outflanking with Legion of the Night. If you feel like running a Legion of the Night for like 270 points, 20 wolves shows up on your opponent's flank or back line turn two. They have to account for that. So while this isn't the most killy, you know, 20 dire wolves are not the most killy unit that we have access to or anybody does. Still, 20 of them showing up from a flank is a big deal. So the opponent has to know about that. They have to account for that. And if they show up, maybe the deployment allows us to show up on their back lines. We're going to get them in a pincer move, and that could be good for us. Fast moving screen for Blood Knights, they are great. A lot of people don't think about them in the Castellite Dynasty too much because you're more, heavily Blood Knight focused or something. But having 2 or even 3 direwolf units in a Castellite list is pretty good because they're cheap enough. They can sit and babysit a point. Like maybe your knights want to go out and fight. These guys can sit back. They can also screen for them, be a moving screen. So maybe you're moving your knights up and you're worried about a double turn or you're worried about whatever. The wolves move up in front of them. You got that. So they just synergize really well with the speed. Blocking. Let's talk about blocking. But blocking is similar to screening. Screening is where you're going to actually, hey, I'm putting something up so you don't hurt my unit. Not you don't hurt the unit that I don't want you to. And a blocking is a similar thing, but it can be used just to deny areas of the board. So I'm not actually screening anything off for me. I'm actually going to go fill a gap between 2 pieces of terrain and deny you movement through that. And while these guys are not going to sit there forever, they are a speed bump. So if you're like, hey, I've got a point over here, I'm going to go move these guys up and I'm going to block. Another good, interesting tactic, and you can even use this with the Bella Rush, is where you don't actually charge in. You just move your dire wolves up, you run them as far as you can, about 4 inches out from the enemy, and you just sit there and say, okay, here's your speed bump. You're going to have to charge. They're going to have to charge in, kill the wolves, and then that's probably what they're going to do. However, that actually sets them back 1 turn of movement. So maybe they don't get to those center points if we're playing a game with points in the middle, because they're going to have to kill those wolves a turn, then the next turn activate and then move up. So these guys can just be really, really awesome speed bumps that you can use tactically. All right, so like I said, there's tons more tactics for these guys. There's all sorts of synergies in the book, and a lot of the things that I've said in previous Warscroll reviews apply to these guys when we're talking summonable, we're talking Deadwalker and stuff like that. So let's get down to the grade. What is my grade on these guys? Well, I'm going to give them an A. It's a solid unit with loads of uses and ways to be buffed. Can easily be healed, brought back in multiple ways. Almost every list can find a use for at least 1 unit. I'm telling you, pretty much, if you're not running at least 1 unit of dire wolves, I mean, that's fine, but I just think there's so much use and synergy for them in the book. Now, on the downside, they don't have the best damage output, but make up for it with speed and utility. I really debated on giving these guys an A+, but for me to give these guys an A+, they would have to be a little bit better save or a little bit better damage output. It could actually be argued they're an A- because of those factors, but I think just their utility in the book, especially if you're running something that's going to have synergy with them, like Vicros or other units that give them extra attacks on summonables and things, that they're just for 135 points, 10-inch speed, 2 attacks each, can be brought back, can be healed. They're just a very, very good unit and something that's is very useful. So that's what I got for Direwolves. In the comments, let me know your tactics. What did I miss? What do you use them as? Do you think they're an A? Do you think they're an A+? Do you think they're a C? Let me know. And as always, thanks for watching, and y'all be good.